I think we're still gonna have more attacks. I mean, and we cannot afford it anymore.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. Today on the show, Lebanon is still shell-shocked after Israeli attacks on Beirut, just hours after the ceasefire with Iran was announced, how things look on the ground there today, plus how China ended up an unlikely go-between in the war, and what Beijing stands to gain from the negotiations in Islamabad. So first, the tenuous ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran appears to be hanging on by a thread. Shipping traffic in the Strait of Hormuz is effectively at a standstill, despite it being President Trump's key demand in the deal. Another point of contention, Israeli strikes inside Lebanon. Pakistan said that Lebanon was included in the agreement, but Israel said that its campaign against Hezbollah was not part of the ceasefire and launched another day of attacks, including on the Lebanese capital of Beirut. Hundreds of people were injured, and crews are still working to pull civilians from the rubble. In a phone call with NBC News, President Trump said he had spoken with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and that Netanyahu had agreed to, quote unquote, scale back its attacks on Lebanon. Today, Netanyahu said in a statement that he's directed his cabinet to open negotiations with Lebanon as soon as possible. So, how do people on the ground in Lebanon actually feel about this conflict? And do they see an end in the short term with everything they have experienced? So for that, I want to bring in our freelance producer on the ground in Lebanon, Zoya Awky. Hi, Zoya.
Hello.
It's great to talk to you, Zoya. Thank you for joining us. I want to start with this statement that I mentioned from the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. He has instructed his cabinet to open negotiations with Lebanon as soon as possible, to focus, as he puts it, on disarming Hezbollah and establishing peaceful negotiations. What is the Lebanese government right now saying about these potential negotiations and ending the war with Israel?
The cabinet held a meeting and the spokesman of the cabinet said in a press conference earlier today that President Aoun insisted to have direct negotiation with Israel, mentioning that he doesn't want any negotiation through Iran regarding ceasefires with Lebanon or peace agreement with Lebanon. And at the same time, Prime Minister Nawaf Salam contacted the Prime Minister of Pakistan and thanked him for all his efforts regarding the ceasefires and asked him to include Lebanon in the ceasefires agreements. Lebanese government stand, they don't want to go through Iran, they want to have direct negotiation with Israel.
So they want direct negotiations with Israel, but they also want Pakistan to include them in the ceasefire agreement until they can come to a consensus through direct negotiations with Israel. Is that what I understand you saying?
Exactly.
Do the Lebanese people, Zoya, feel as if they can trust these negotiations will happen in good faith?
With all what's happening on the ground, and especially with what happened yesterday, it was devastating. Lebanese people, they don't trust the government. They want to get rid of Hezbollah's arm. They are really in a very terrible situation.
Let's, Zoya, talk about what happened yesterday. Just hours after the U.S.-Iran ceasefire was announced, Israel launched an attack on Beirut. When the ceasefire news came through, what were Lebanese thinking about their safety, their future? Did they feel as if it applied to them, that they could return to their homes, for instance, and go back to life because a ceasefire had been struck?
Well, as far as we received the news from the Pakistani Prime Minister saying that Lebanon was included in the ceasefire, many Lebanese displaced were ready to go back to their homes to check on them in the south and in the Beirut southern suburbs, but the army asked them not to do so. So people were excited, and then all of a sudden around 2 p.m. Israel launched within 10 minutes 100 different attacks over the whole Beirut, the south, Saida, and Tyre and the whole Lebanese territory. So people were in shock.
I think it's important for folks to understand and just to remind people what was happening in southern Lebanon, Zoya, as you and I were talking, because there was essentially a mass evacuation from southern Lebanon going north because there were repeated attacks from Israel on southern Lebanon, right? So there was a major humanitarian crisis happening inside, and there is a major humanitarian crisis happening inside Lebanon in which people have nowhere to live, nowhere to stay because they've evacuated their homes in the south. And then, as you mentioned, people wanting to go back home, the ceasefire is announced, and then this attack happens. I know you've been speaking with a lot of people on the ground, a lot of Lebanese on the ground there, especially people in and around Beirut. How did they react to these latest attacks? What were they telling you?
Well, people were devastated. I mean, let me give you a few figures. Until yesterday morning, we had around 1,200,000 displaced people from the south and from the suburbs of Beirut. Yesterday, we had more displaced people. We had yesterday only 254 killed and over 1,165 wounded. Today, Israel sent evacuation order to Al-Dahiya, which is the southern suburb of Beirut. So again, today we had displaced people. So on daily basis, we have displaced people. We have people that have been killed. People are, especially yesterday. Yesterday was terrible because it all happened at the same time. People lost their houses. People are still missing up till today. People are under the rubbles up till now. So the situation is dramatic. How do people feel? I mean, we are all devastated. I can't tell you the terror that took place yesterday in Beirut and in the south.
When you hear Israel saying that they are coming after Hezbollah, they are striking because of Hezbollah, is that bearing out on the ground in Lebanon from what you've been seeing and the attacks you've been seeing, or are they striking mainly civilians?
Well, people are paranoid now because sometimes they send evacuation orders and everybody leaves, and then all what they want is just to target one person or two people from Hezbollah. At the same time, they are killing civilians when they attack a whole building. Yesterday, after the 100 attacks, they attacked one building, a 10-story building in Tal al-Khayyat. The whole building was on the ground and all the people there were civilians. And what the Israelis declared after that, they killed the nephew of Naim Qasim in that building. Or is it worth to kill? I mean, only in this building there, at least 30 people were killed because they wanted to target the nephew of Naim Qasim.
The image you paint for me sounds, as you mentioned, dramatic, right? You have a 10-story building, as you describe, civilians inside, the 10-story building leveled. They're targeting one Hezbollah fighter inside this 10-story building, according to what you're telling us. Describe for us other scenes inside and around Beirut that came from this attack.
3 days ago, they targeted an apartment in Ain Saadi, which is in the Christian suburb, and 3 people were killed in that building. A man who belongs to the Lebanese forces, which is a Christian political party, completely against Hezbollah, with his wife and his neighbor. And we don't know, and all what they said, we're sorry, we missed the target. We were targeting somebody from Hezbollah, and then we missed the target. So people are getting paranoid because they are afraid to receive the displaced. So this is a humanitarian crisis.
And there are still people under the rubble today after the attack yesterday?
Yes. Up till today, we have like around 60 missing people. Their families are going from one hospital to another hospital to check if they found them, whether killed, whether injured, etc. At the Rafiq Hariri Public Hospital, There was a container that was standing in front of the Hariri Public Hospital that had 95 corpses, and families were around it just to come and check if any of their relatives are in that container. Believe it or not. People are still under the rubbles. I mean, yesterday was a terrible day for Beirut and for the whole country.
So with that in mind, I mean, the image that you just described is horrifying. A container full of, corpses, up to almost 100 people. Families just searching for their brother, their sister, their mother, their father, their children in this container outside this hospital. If diplomacy doesn't work, what to you does the next few weeks look like? What are the expectations of Lebanese in the coming weeks if they cannot reach a deal?
I think we're still gonna have more attacks. I mean, and we cannot afford it anymore. Right now, like, people are again on the streets, but there is no more room in shelters, on the streets, on the coast. People spend their nights on the streets. Some of them, if their building was not attacked, they go back to their areas. Some of them don't know where to go. Let's hope things work out, because we've had enough.
Zoya Awky, thank you.
Thank you.
So as Israel and Iran and the U.S., they edged closer and closer to a wider war, there were two unlikely players that stepped in to help cool things down. It was China and it was Pakistan, each with very different motives. Pakistan is juggling conflicts on multiple fronts, trying to manage tensions with Afghanistan, while also easing pressure along its border with Iran. But how did China end up playing a mediator? And what do they stand to gain? So earlier today, I spoke with NBC News correspondent Janis Mackey Frayer, who's on the ground for us in Beijing. Hi, Janis.
Hey, Yasmin.
So China and Iran have had a close economic alliance for quite some time. China is, as we all well know at this point, because you and I have spoken before, the primary buyer of Iranian oil, hence being very much affected by the blockade at the Strait of Hormuz and this ongoing conflict between the United States, Iran, and Israel. How much has China been impacted by this war? How are we seeing it bear out on the ground there? And is this one of the reasons why Beijing ultimately stepped in to help negotiate a temporary ceasefire?
Beijing stepped in for reasons of energy security because it gets so much of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. And this is oil that's coming not just from Iran, but from the rest of the Middle East as well. So it has this vested interest in having energy flows restored and having the strait reopened. What it also has is leverage over Iran. And we saw them use this leverage after weeks of sitting on the sidelines and not getting involved in the war. And Beijing's motivation, it can be looked at in a couple of different ways. Yes, it's buying a lot of Iranian oil, 10 to 13% of Iranian oil, but it's not so much how much they're buying, but how they're buying it. And because there is this whole other parallel system for doing business with Iran when it comes to oil. Because Iran is heavily sanctioned, it can't sell its oil on the global market by regular means. And so there's been this parallel ecosystem, this complex network that's been created that starts with shadow fleets where Iranian oil is put on cargo ships and it's transferred to other ships at sea. It's relabeled, and by the time it makes it to Asia, it's something entirely different. And this oil, to avoid sanctions, is being processed at these teapot refineries on China's coast, mostly in Shandong province. And it's being processed there, deep discounts, $10 to $20 a barrel. So what we have is China stepping in not only to protect its supply of oil, but the system that makes that supply possible. And so while shorter term, China has about 3 months worth of reserves, it has other suppliers that it can turn to, like Russia and Iraq. It was really looking to protect this system that it has with Iran, which also bypasses the entire US dollar system.
When you say China has leverage over Iran, is that economic, monetary leverage, i.e., we will not continue to buy your oil, we'll go elsewhere if you do not come to some sort of negotiation or some sort of ceasefire on this war? Is that what you're talking about when it comes to leverage?
It's leverage in the economic sense, in that China is Iran's economic lifeline. The fact that Iran has been able to sell its oil to China at deep discounts for so long has allowed Iran to get revenue from that oil. By some estimates, up to 45% of Iran's revenues were coming from purchases linked to China. And then there's also the diplomatic leverage as well. When Tehran goes into these negotiations with the United States, they are going to be doing so with China's best interests in mind as well. And so that's seen as the reason why Beijing is weighing in now, is because they had the opportunity and the leverage to say to Tehran that this might be the best possible off-ramp for this conflict.
How is it that Beijing has gotten involved to help negotiate this current ceasefire? How are they planning on remaining involved to get to a permanent end to the war?
Well, this isn't a last-minute intervention. China has actually been involved, though quietly, from the very beginning. Their messaging has been very consistent. They have been talking with representatives from all sides, in particular Tehran. And a lot of the time, the messaging to Tehran was that they need to de-escalate the situation as well. They're not acting as a mediator. Pakistan is the mediator here, but they are reinforcing what Pakistan is trying to do in order to bring an end to the crisis. So when they're all in the room in Islamabad, China will not be there in the, a traditional sense, in that they're going to be sitting at the table and helping to hammer out a deal. But in terms of influence, they will be very much in the room.
You're talking about this weekend, these peace talks that are happening in Islamabad. We know Vice President J.D. Vance will be there, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, along with the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, as well. Even if China is not in the room, who are they directly speaking to about these negotiations, and who is speaking on China's behalf? Are they speaking directly to the Iranians? Are they speaking to the Pakistanis?
Yes and yes. They have been working closely with officials from Pakistan, as well as diplomats from Tehran, in communicating their message, in offering the support. Even Pakistani officials were saying that it was Beijing's intervention that did help convince Tehran to accept this temporary ceasefire. This is something that President Trump acknowledged as well. This is China also wanting to position itself as this global player, as a responsible player. And it's one of those rare opportunities when China is presenting itself in a way that it can cooperate with the United States in order to help resolve a crisis, which is not something we often see. But I do think that timing has a lot to do with it too, Yasmin, with President Trump expected to be visiting Beijing and having his summit with Xi Jinping just weeks from now, and the full expectation on the Chinese side that the conflict has to be, if not fully resolved, at least de-escalated to a point of being stable so that there can be pragmatic engagement between China and the U.S. Because while President Trump had said that he was delaying the summit, which was supposed to be held a couple of weeks ago, because of the war, there was the sense as well that China was being motivated into intervening with Tehran so that there could be a more stable stage for this summit to happen.
What type of impact could China's intervention in helping negotiate this ceasefire deal and potential end to the war have on their own relations with the United States, in addition to some of what you just talked about, having a more pragmatic approach?
It still won't change the fact that there are some that there's a deep strategic mistrust between the U.S. and China. So yes, there will be a diplomatic pop that comes from this, and it'll be well timed with the summit. But there are still some very thorny issues that remain between the U.S. and China on trade, on tariffs. Some would say what has enabled Iran to fight the war as long as it has, in that China has helped Iran evade sanctions with creating this parallel universe in the oil trade. And so that will also be a sticking point for the U.S. when they're sitting in the room here in Beijing.
Janis, Mackey, Frayer, thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin.
All right, that is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. If you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.